Hello again, everyone, and welcome back to our video series, your go-to guide to finding your new home. This is our final video, and we are discussing purchase and sale agreements and the closing. Here to help us today with this topic is one of our preferred attorneys, Matthew Arakelian with Legris.
Hi, Matt. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Hi, how you doing, Carla?
Good.
Good.
So we get a lot of questions from our buyer clients just about what the role of an attorney is. So we're really happy to have you here to discuss what you do and how important it is having an attorney in this home buying process.
Absolutely, my pleasure. Be happy to chat with you guys about some questions, for some first-time home buyers, for some seasoned investors, all the way across the board. Sure.
Wonderful. So the first main question is, what does a real estate attorney do, and do we really need one?
Sure. So I think the term real estate attorney can cast a big umbrella. There are other things that certain real estate attorneys do, like litigation, like landlord-tenant law. We're very specialized in that, for purposes of our conversation, we handle residential and commercial transactions. So we're transactional lawyers. So what that means is that when someone's conducting a purchase or sale, they need representation, they need an advocate just like an agent. So we handle the legal aspect of the transaction. Why is someone like me needed? And I think we're going to go into this a little bit more, versus a different kind of lawyer, but we can chat about a little, the specifics now if you'd like.
Yeah, that actually is my next question. I feel like we hear all the time, hey, I have a friend who's a lawyer. Can they help me with this? And
sure. Oh, yeah, I know.
I specialize in real estate. So
sure. I cringe when I hear that. And, everyone always has a relative or a friend that went to law school that took property law, and they think that is that sufficient. And, just like you wouldn't go to, a podiatrist if you have a heart issue. I mean, we're very specialized in legal aspects. Personal injury attorneys, bankruptcy attorneys, they wouldn't handle what I do, and I wouldn't handle what they do. And, it's definitely, it's different. There's no such thing as a general practitioner in law anymore. At least there shouldn't be. Just real estate is very specialized, like I mentioned, and it really requires daily attention to each file. It's very cliche to say that, but things change so quickly in our business that you need to be able to shuffle and pivot and change in everything on every file and every day. It sounds stressful, but if you're not used to the real estate world like we living in, it's very difficult to work with, a lawyer that may be in court all day. Sometimes if I'm on the other side and the lawyer says, I can't get back to you until I'm out of court, that shows me that they're not really focused on the real estate conveyancing side.
Right. So in terms of that too, in terms of what you do to represent the buyers during this process, what is, kind of the two-part process that you help them through?
Sure. So that's a good term, two-part process, because it really is the buyer representation piece and the settlement/closing piece. So the first, really happens, at the beginning, the due diligence phase between offer and P&S. A buyer will conduct typically a home inspection, which is obviously, a good thing. Sometimes there are certain circumstances where they're waiving that, but I don't think for purposes of today, we're discussing that. But, we'll talk about condo first. When I tell people when they're buying, a condo, for example, they're not just buying a piece of property, but they're buying into an association. So it's an important aspect that we examine, not only the governing documents like the master deed and the trust, but we look at financials, we look at meeting minutes, we look at big picture stuff and everyday stuff that might come up, whether they're talking about an increase in common fees, whether they're talking about a special assessment that may affect their budget down the road. We ask those questions, and there's an important reason why we're asking those questions. We're very aggressive when it comes to that. And the reason is that sellers in Massachusetts aren't required to disclose much. So that's why the onus becomes, shifts to us, yourself and myself, to ask these questions. So, we give our buyer clients as much information as we can, and certainly it's not my job to sway a client one way or another, but it's to advise them. It's to give them the information that they may not have had if they were doing this on their own, for example. Right. So, my job is to protect the buyer. We go through the process. At the end of the day, I want to make sure that if I'm representing a buyer, that the agreement is very buyer friendly. Let's just say that. When I'm working for a seller, the same thing. We represent them. We track their mortgage commitment if they're working with a lender. And that kind of shifts to the second piece, is the settlement. Typically, when I represent a buyer, I would say 9 out of 10 times we can handle, not only their representation, but we can handle their closing for their lender. You know, our firm has a huge footprint here in Massachusetts where we're pretty much on everyone's approved list, which means, again, it's going to save them money, number one. You know, they don't have to use a lawyer to do their, you know, buyer representation and also handle the closing. We can do both. And again, that's, you know, not every firm is set up like that. Some firms are not on these lenders approved lists. So that's why, you know, it's a wise decision to go with someone like us. Not only, you know, to save some money, but they have more familiarity with the local lenders that we're working with.
So when you talk about how you want to make, you know, the agreement buyer friendly and you want to protect the buyer and work in their interests if you're working on the buy side, let's say,
Sure.
What are the protections that you would put into a document like a purchase and sale agreement? And then we can
Sure.
kind of go into the purchase and sale agreement as a whole too.
Sure. I mean, so, you know, so Mass is definitely, it's a 2-contract state, right? The offer binds the clients. And then the purchase and sales agreement, you know, let's just say it refines those terms. You know, the offer has about 8 or 9 bullet points. Purchase and sales agreements tend to have 60. So what else is in there? We try to get as many representations from the seller as we can. And again, I'm speaking as a buyer representative right now. Not only, you know, are we talking about the material terms, you know, like the price and closing dates and all that, that's pretty general. But we're adding title provisions. And what does that mean? Well, we're making sure that when we get a title search back, we want to make sure that it's marketable. And there's certain language in there that I put in the agreements that govern that. You know, if a client's going with a standard, you know, GBREB purchase and sales agreement, it's going to lack these provisions that I put in there. And again, you know, if I'm working with another lawyer on the other side who does real estate, you know, we go back and forth as many times as we need to, just like you would do as an agent, until we come to an agreement. And it's certainly not everything that I propose gets accepted. And again, it goes back to, you know, basically buyer beware, right? So the seller's not really required to disclose these things. But, you know, along with title provisions, we're going to be adding, if it's, you know, out in the suburbs, we're going to be adding septic provisions. We're going to be adding, you know, whether they're closing cost credits. There's a number of things. Permitting is a big thing. You know, one thing that comes up a lot is, you know, in the do-it-yourself world that we're living in, some people may have done a renovation or two and not pulled a permit. So that's something that we always push on. And again, without asking, the seller's not going to be required to disclose this. So that's something that I push on quite a bit for clients.
We talked about that a lot in our inspection interview with Lenny, that he sees that a lot. He's like, there's a new bathroom. There was no permits pulled for this.
Yeah, yeah. And usually without even asking, yeah. I mean, a good inspector will be able to tell something right off the bat, whether it is, but we still like to, you know, make the seller go on record and state that, you know, regardless of what a seller may represent or refuse to represent, you know, one extra thing that I always do, and I was going to talk about this too, is, you know, we check the ISD, the Inspection Department records, to make sure that, you know, if MLS is advertising not only gut renovation, but to say, you know, new kitchen, new roof, we want to make sure that, well, that's obviously a flag that a permit would have been required. So we check that. And if there's a lack of permits, then we have a problem, or at least we bring it to the buyer's attention, and obviously they make their decision. But that's something that I do a lot of. And unfortunately, there's a lot of sellers out there that, you know, that cut a corner or two. So we got to be careful about that for our clients.
Yeah. So 2 quick vocab questions for you.
Sure,
What is a deed and what is title?
Sure. So the second one is, there's a lot of misconception on what that is. We'll talk about the deed first. So the deed is the actual conveying document. So, you know, what transfers the property from seller to buyer is that actual physical deed. So it just basically says seller to convey to buyer for X consideration. And it has a legal description on there. And what happens is, that's the document that we actually, when it comes said and done, at the end of the process, that's what we record at the Registry of Deeds. So without that being filed, the conveyance doesn't happen. So that's actually the last part of the whole deal. And again, it kind of leads up to your second question on what is a title. So the title is actually, it's different from, you know, say you pay off your car and they give you a piece of paper saying, congratulations, here's the title to your car. It's different in real estate. What title represents is the history of the property. So when we say we have to do a title exam, that means that we have to run through at least the last 50 years of all the conveyancing, not only the deeds, but the mortgages, any liens, anything that comes up on that property. So we run the property, we run the owner, we index everything. So a lot of times things will come up that maybe are just out of the ordinary, other than just a mortgage. You know, I think you probably recall, we had a deal a couple of years ago where there was a title issue that lasted to get it fixed lasted a year and a half. So things come up. Again, this is, that's not the typical day-to-day things, but that's why we get that done. Also, just something else too, when a title exam does come in, we review it. We make sure if there's, A, B, and C need to get fixed, we do that. But we also have employ a title attorney in our firm that gives us another look over, basically a last line of defense that a lot of other firms don't have that in-house. So that's just, it's more reassuring to a client when I tell them that, listen, you're paying a lot of money. We're playing defense for you, and we also have several people that are looking at your file. So a lot of the legwork goes in behind the scenes, and I try not to raise too many concerns unless we need to, but there is a lot to it.
Yeah. So then to lead up to a closing, what happens at a closing, especially honestly during COVID times right now? Like how do you conduct them? Who needs to be there?
So we can talk about the COVID thing second, but the closing is the easiest part of the whole deal. At least it should be. I think that people think that real estate attorneys, that's all they do is they sit in an office and do paperwork and point here, sign here. That's probably 5% of what I actually do on a day-to-day basis. It should be basically the closing is when buyers and sellers come to the office. Again, we used to meet at the registries, but during COVID, we're really isolating everything to our offices to contain everything and for everyone's safety, really. We do the signing. We witness everything. We notarize everything. We collect documents from both the seller. We collect money from the buyer, and we disperse funds and we record documents. So it's kind of like, the quarterback of the whole transaction. We get everything going where it needs to go. Now, as far as what's happened differently for COVID, again, we have 3 offices here in Massachusetts, Newton, Wellesley, and Boston. We're really concentrating our closings in the Newton office just for safety reasons. So we can, focus on cleaning 3 to 4 times a day and everything like that. But typically buyers were coming with their agents. Sometimes the sellers will come. Sometimes family members will come. Sometimes the realtors and the loan officers will come. These days, we're really asking just the people that are signing to come. Obviously, when things relax, we'll go back to normal, we think. But, leading up to the closing, what happens too is, buyers are doing their home inspection, their final walkthrough. If there's any issues, obviously, you and I would work through those with our clients respectively. But assuming nothing big ticket comes up during that walkthrough, the closing is the home stretch and is really just a
most exciting part.
Exercise. Yeah, and an exciting part, right? Yeah.
So Matt, is there anything else that you can think of that you think is important for people to know? I feel like we get being in a big city, we get a lot of people from out of state who haven't learned the process that we go through here in Massachusetts. So is there anything else?
Well, one thing is, certainly when I work with a client and when I can handle their closing for the lender, I think I alluded to a few minutes ago, there is a discount on my end that I can provide. And that's something that people always ask, number one, is there any kind of word discount? You're not going to hear the word discount many times in Massachusetts in general when you're talking real estate. Yep. So typically when that comes up, people are excited. If they were going with, like a credit union where sometimes they have, a closed list, typically, my fee is much higher. But when I can handle the closing, and again, 9 out of 10 times I can, there is a discount given on my buyer representation fee. So it's usually I charge half of what I normally would charge. So, 50% discount on anything is huge. So that's something that people don't typically know. What else? I think as far as out of state people, I've had definitely people from the West Coast, from New York, from anywhere else other than New England, really, that don't understand that buyer beware piece of Massachusetts. So that's why, when people try to go in, blindfolded and say, listen, I might try to do this on my own. If they're not used to doing that and they don't realize that a seller really doesn't have to disclose anything, it becomes challenging. And, we're talking, millions of dollars here in Massachusetts, and you really shouldn't chance that with just, trying that on your own. So that would be my advice.
It's important to have a good team behind you.
Yeah, 100%.
Agent, lender, attorney, everybody.
100%. Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you so much for your time today, Matt. I know you're busy, so we really appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me. Sounds good.
Hello, it's Lina, and I'm back. Lina Kriva of Lina Kriva Homes International. We want to thank you for attending the video series. It has been a pleasure to have you here. If you have any questions, our information will be at the end of the video series. And please reach out to us if you need the guide or if you need help finding your next home. We look forward to meeting you. Have a great day.